What's happening? A happy hump day to all of you. Thanks for joining me as always. It is very much appreciated. Later on, we'll get into the draft and how big of a week this truly is for the Patriots organization. But we start today with this ESPN report. Don Van Natta, Seth Wickersham, Jeremy Fowler, three of the hardest hitting journalists, insiders at ESPN, all got together to write about Bill Belichick's offseason and how it did not go according to his plan. The huge story on Belichick's job hunt. I would suggest you guys check it out when you have the time to do so, if you haven't done so just yet. Now, there's a lot in this report. There is something about Atlanta blindsiding Belichick by this decision, hiring Raheem Morris. Belichick was not ready for that. There's the fact that Atlanta had a top three as far as head coaching, people who they thought that they believed could fill that head coach spot. It was Raheem Morris, Mike McDonald, and Bobby Slowick. So there's a lot in this report, but we're going to focus on the Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick element because that is truly what matters here. We all want to emotionally move forward. I said this last week. We want to move forward from Belichick. We want to move forward from Tom Brady. At least some of us want to move forward from those two individuals and look towards the future. Brady's going to be 47 years old in August. Belichick just turned 72. And this offseason should be about the future of this football team. However, we've got to react to the news and we've got to talk about Robert Kraft because obviously he is still here. He is still the owner. So when something pertinent comes out about RKK, we've got to discuss it on this podcast, which is why we're going to address this. A huge piece of the Atlanta story, a huge piece of why Belichick was not hired in Atlanta, according to this story, was Robert Kraft. Here's what ESPN wrote. Arthur Blank, obviously the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, Blank and Belichick checked each other's references. Blank spoke by phone at least twice to Robert Kraft. In a conversation with Blank, Kraft delivered a stark assessment of Belichick's character, according to a source who spoke to two people, a close Kraft friend and a longtime Belichick confidant. Now, this is interesting because you've got one side from Belichick and one side from Kraft, and they agree on what RKK said. Right? This is a source speaking to ESPN who spoke to two people, a Kraft friend and a longtime Belichick confidant, and went back to ESPN and said, this is what each guy told me or each person told me. I would love to know who the person in the middle is. Who is the person in the middle? Who is the person who spoke to a close Kraft friend and a longtime Belichick confidant? Who is that person? I mean, we can throw names out there, but I don't want to speculate. That's kind of a detail that is fascinating to me that I don't know if many people are going to talk about. Who this source was who spoke to each side. Who is bridging the gap here? We'll probably never know. The source quoted the Belichick source as saying, quote, Robert called Arthur to warn him not to trust Bill. That account was backed up, the source said, by the close Kraft friend. Multiple sources said that Kraft spoke with, quote unquote, some candor to Blank about Belichick, though the sources declined to elaborate. One source close to Belichick, my God, I just realized how many times this story says source in it. One source close to Belichick said Kraft was a big part of why the Falcons passed on hiring him. The sources said Kraft made clear to Blank that, quote, you'll never have a warm conversation with Belichick. Quote, Blank likes coaches who feel part of a family. That's according to a Falcon source. And it wasn't going to be that way with Bill, unquote. A second source close to Kraft said, quote, Kraft found Bill to be extremely difficult and obstinate and kind of stubborn and in the end not worthy of his trust and also very, very, very arrogant. The same source said he did not know if Kraft had warned Blank about Belichick's trustworthiness, but he said both Krafts felt betrayed by the coach. Here's a quote. I don't think they try to hurt Belichick, but I don't think they tried to help him either. They weren't going to try to sink him. He was finished as an effective head coach. Just look at his last 4 years in New England, a disaster. If you're Arthur Blank, why do you want the headaches? Let me just stop right there. That source, whoever spoke to ESPN, what are we doing? Why are you adding on to this, right? Okay, you've got information, and you tell that information to ESPN, but then you feel like it's necessary to go out there and bury Bill Belichick. Why would this person say, oh, just look at his last 4 years in New England? He was finished as an effective head coach. He was a disaster. Why do we have that little bit of information at the end there? The source is 100% slanted, right? Doesn't that give it away? That at least that one source who spoke to ESPN, who's going out of their way to bury Bill Belichick? All he had to say, all that source had to say was, I don't think that the Krafts would try to hurt Belichick, but I don't think they would try to help him either. They weren't going to try to sink him. That's fine. Just stop there. Why do you have to add he was finished as an effective head coach? Look at his last 4 years in New England. That's an agenda. That source is serving an agenda. Their own agenda or somebody else's agenda. Didn't like that. Stacey James, Patriots spokesman, spoke to ESPN and said, quote, Robert steadfastly denies saying anything negative to Arthur Blank about Bill Belichick after Robert and Bill mutually agreed to part ways. In fact, Robert advocated for Bill to get the job. When asked if Kraft had ever criticized Belichick in conversations with Blank, James said Kraft had no recollection of doing that. I love that. No recollection. Not saying he didn't do it. He just doesn't remember doing it. Two different things. But Stacey James did acknowledge that Kraft might have done so prior to January. So was the hay in the barn. So Stacey James speaks to ESPN in an official capacity, and he says Kraft has no recollection of criticizing Belichick during a conversation with Arthur Blank. But was that possible before January? Sure, that might have been possible. So if Kraft is all fired up, right, he's pissed at Belichick. Patriots aren't winning. He's frustrated. He knows he wants to get rid of Belichick. He's having phone calls with Arthur Blank. He's having conversations with Arthur Blank, and he's like, this guy's awful. I'm tired of this guy. That's possible. After January, not so much. So was the hay in the barn before the reference phone call? All right, before we continue, don't forget to give us that like, give us that thumbs up. Look, going to be honest here. We have to try to defeat this YouTube algorithm. The views have dropped a little bit the last couple of days, and that's because of the likes. Less likes, less eyeballs. So if you want to support the program, if you like what we do, I know it's like a broken record, but please give us that thumbs up on YouTube. It helps drive the traffic. It helps YouTube shoot this to other people who are not looking for the video. So give us that like, and don't forget to subscribe. Next goal is 3,500 subscriptions. We are well away from that, but let's do it slowly. Let's do it steadily. Let's continue to support the program. Rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. Back to the story. A Falcons spokesman declined to comment on whether Kraft criticized Belichick to Blank during the interview process, but pointed to Blank's repeated comments to reporters during Super Bowl week that Kraft had endorsed Belichick. Okay, great. It means nothing. It means nothing. What's said publicly doesn't matter. Arthur Blank could sit up there and tell the media that Robert Kraft was glowing about Belichick, that he suggested to hire Belichick. What you say publicly doesn't matter. What is he going to say to the media? Is Arthur Blank going to sit up there and say, yeah, you know what? Kraft railroaded Belichick. He told me, don't hire the guy. This isn't good. Asked whether Kraft had any motivation to keep Belichick off the sidelines, a source close to the coach, so again, this is somebody close to Belichick, said, quote, if Bill goes on to have success and Tom already had success, then who does Kraft have to blame? There's more context to this conversation. There's much more context to it. We've gone over it a lot of times. I'm not going to go over it again. There's a difference between Belichick, the GM, and Belichick, the head coach. So if Bill goes on to have success as a head coach, That's a different conversation than what he would have done here in New England because he was the czar of the football operation. It was different. It was different. All right, so a few things. Few things about this story, a few things about Belichick and what happened in the offseason, and then we're going to go to the draft. First of all, it is absolutely possible, if not probable, that Robert Kraft wanted to, quote unquote, end Bill Belichick. Let's not forget the Super Bowl video that did not have Belichick in it, right? That tribute video that Patriots.com did going back about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And it didn't have any video of Belichick, as if he did not exist. That was done for a reason. So there is evidence of pettiness from the Patriots, from the top upper echelon tiers of the organization towards Belichick. All you have to do is look at that video. You can also go back to plenty of reports, people close to the Krafts leaking information and all these other things regarding Belichick and what he did and what he didn't do. It is 100%. It is 100% at least a possibility that Kraft wants to end Belichick, didn't want the Falcons to hire Belichick because Kraft doesn't want Belichick to succeed, because if Belichick succeeds, it makes Kraft look worse. That's at least a possibility. If you wipe off that table, if you wipe that off the table, rather, that's just not reality. That is absolutely a possibility with this. However, what else is a possibility is that Kraft was in a ridiculously tough spot. Let me put you in Robert Kraft's shoes. I don't think enough people in this world, when they discuss certain situations, put themselves in the shoes of the person that is being written about or had to make a certain decision, et cetera, et cetera. Let's say you're Robert Kraft and you are good friends with Arthur Blank. And Arthur Blank wants to talk to you about the guy that you just employed for 24 years. Are you going to be honest to your friend? Put yourself in that situation. Say you have a couple of friends. One friend is looking to hire for a certain position. Your other friend wants that position, or at least a confidant of yours, somebody that you know, an acquaintance. You don't necessarily want to get in the way of that person getting the job, but you also don't want to lie to your friend, right? So this was a very, very difficult position for Kraft to be in. On one side, he's got a close friend, a fellow owner, and we all know owners stick together for the most part. They will take bullets for each other. They will absolutely put Roger Goodell in front of them to take the bullets. So you've got a fellow owner and a friend who wants to know the scoop on Belichick. Meanwhile, you have the guy on the other side who you just let go after 24 years, brought 6 Super Bowls to your organization, drafted and developed Tom Brady, all of those things. That's a very tough spot for Kraft to be in. Just think about it from the human being level. Are you going to lie to your friend who's saying, hey, man, should I hire this guy? You know, if you're going to be honest, and if you're going to give Arthur Blank the truth about how you feel regarding Belichick and how things went, especially towards the end, if you don't trust somebody, are you going to lie to your friend who's looking for that reference? Are you going to lie to your friend and tell him, hire that guy, I trust him, no issues? Are you going to do that? Or are you going to be honest with your friend? Are you going to sit there on the phone and tell Arthur Blank, you know what, Arthur, guy did a great job for 20 years. He was fantastic. But towards the end, it wasn't great. And I don't think he's the most trustworthy guy that's going to be working underneath you. Right? Are you going to try to stay out of it? Because if you stay out of it, it's a red flag. If Arthur Blank calls you and says, hey, man, what do you think? Arthur, you know what? That's your decision to make. You're pretty much telling Arthur Blank, for all intents and purposes, by not answering his questions, that you don't necessarily believe in Belichick, and you're not suggesting, you're not advising him to give Belichick that job. So you can't ignore the situation. You have to have that conversation with Blank, right? Because if you keep dismissing it means that you're dismissing Belichick. That person is looking for Robert Kraft to tell him, Blank's looking for Kraft to tell him, Belichick would be a good hire. That's why the conversation happens. If you tell Blank that there's no concerns, then you're lying to a friend. Now, Kraft, if he told Blank to not trust Bill, that is huge. That is big. Because what do I always say when we talk about football? When we talked about Gerard Mayo and Elliott Wolf, and Wolf being promoted to the de facto GM, and people were saying, why would you give Wolf the job? Why would you just promote him? Well, no search. I wanted a search for the GM spot. I wanted a search, but I understood. I understood why Wolf got the gig or got the promotion, because Gerard Mayo trusts him. He trusts Mayo. And for at least this offseason, and I do believe that Wolf will be here long term, but for right now, you want your rookie head coach to work with somebody leading a front office that they trust, that they have a relationship with. Trust is huge. And if Kraft did tell Blank on the phone, hey man, Belichick's not trustworthy, that's a critical piece of information. Because Blank, if he's going to hire Belichick, has to look at this and say, do I trust this guy? Because if I don't trust this guy, I can't hire him. I'll give you an example, because I saw through the chat. I don't know if I can find it. Here it is. Josh Gemini. Arthur, you already have built the roster. He just wants to coach. I would highly recommend it. I understand that part of it, Josh. And Kraft certainly could have said that, but here's the problem. Kraft might not believe Belichick just wants to coach. What if Kraft believes that Belichick would not be able to help himself, but eventually get involved in personnel? What if Kraft understands that Belichick could not survive in this football world without having a big say on personnel matters? You can't speak for Belichick if you're Kraft. You can't say he just wants to coach. You don't know that. And on top of that, if you don't trust Belichick, then you don't trust the idea that he just wants to coach. Because Kraft was asked about this when Belichick was let go, or they mutually parted ways. And it was rather obvious that Kraft did not believe that there could be a clean split from head coach to GM. So if Kraft believes that Belichick wants to run personnel, then he's not going to tell his friend Arthur Blank, hey, he just wants to coach. I highly recommend it. Another part of the trust thing is, if Kraft tells Blank that Bill's not the most trustworthy guy, what happens if Belichick is sitting there with McKay and Fontenot and Blank, and Belichick says, you know what? I'm willing to collaborate. I'm willing to collaborate with all of you. I don't need to be the czar. I don't need to have the job I had in New England. I'm not interested in that anymore. Well, if Robert Kraft just told Blank not to trust Belichick, or at least told him that Belichick's not trustworthy, then why is Blank going to trust Belichick in telling the truth? In the back of Blank's mind, he's got to be thinking, you know what? You're telling me that you want to collaborate, but do you really want to collaborate? You know, when I hire you, when I give you that big fat contract, are you going to start doing what you've got to do to have more say in personnel? Are you going to cause issues? You know, this was the problem going back with Belichick staying here in New England. Even if Belichick told Kraft, I don't worry about personnel anymore, I just want to focus on being a coach, the coach directly impacts who you draft and what you do with that talent. If Elliott Wolf drafts a quarterback that this coaching staff doesn't want, the quarterback's ability to succeed is made much, much more difficult by that. Right? Say if you draft somebody and you have this vision of that guy being a wide receiver one. Well, if the head coach doesn't believe that and he's not giving that guy snaps as a wide receiver one, that impacts the team. So you have to believe and trust that that's what Belichick was going to honestly do. If he told Blank, I want to collaborate, I just want to be a coach, if that conversation came up, Blank would have to believe him and trust him. And when Blank's friend Robert Kraft says Belichick's not the most trustworthy guy, how do you make that hire? Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to rate and review. Had somebody sign up for the Patreon this morning. I appreciate that. It means the world to me. Patreon exclusive content. We're going to go $5 a month, $1.25 a week. If you're interested, check it out. Patreon.com/Nick Cattle, Cattles. By the way, tomorrow's podcast, Jeff Howe will be joining us. We'll have a ton of draft information, intel tomorrow with Jeff Howe from The Athletic. We'll look at it from the Patriots angle. We'll look at some other things. Excited to have Jeff Howe on the program. And next week, we will have a draft analyst on the program, and we'll talk about the draft that is a week from tomorrow. So a lot to do on this show. I'll just wrap it up with this before we get to the draft. There are more reasons than Robert Kraft's phone call or phone calls to Arthur Blank as to why Bill Belichick's not a head coach right now. Not all of the blame can be thrown on Robert Kraft's phone calls. I don't believe that. In this story, it is told to us that Belichick was outside the top 3 for the Falcons. He wasn't even in the final 3. Now, maybe as soon as this reported phone call or phone calls happened between Blank and Kraft, Blank wiped them off the list and said, that's it. But Blank had another conversation with Belichick. So it was not the end-all, be-all. According to this story, the Falcons had Raheem Morris, Mike McDonald, who got hired by Seattle, and Bobby Slowick, who stayed in Houston. They had those 3 guys as their top 3 candidates. So Belichick was not even in the final 3. There are more reasons as to why Belichick is not a head coach than Robert Kraft running around the league and putting the bullet in his head, if that's what happened. Number 1, personnel decisions, right? On the offensive side of the football. He completely ruined that side of the ball for the Patriots. They had to start over from almost scratch this offseason. The handling of a young quarterback. If I'm a team that's hiring and Bill Belichick is interested, if I have a young quarterback, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to say, wait a minute. I look at how he handled Mac Jones. I'm not comfortable with him handling a quarterback. The connection with players. Another issue, another question that owners had. The hiring trend. It's a copycat league. Owners are hiring younger coaches. Mike McDonald, Callahan, Mayo. You can go across the league. A lot of these guys are younger, late 30s, early 40s. That's what the league is doing right now. Not every team is going to be interested in somebody who is 71 years old at the time. That's not ageism on my part. I'm just telling you what the league is looking at. Very difficult to hire somebody who's in their 70s and expect them to relate to every single 20-something-year-old in the locker room. So there are a lot of other things that got in the way of Belichick being a head coach. Belichick on his side was, I would think, very selective. He's not going just after every single job, right? So he only had a certain amount of jobs that he was looking at. And also, let's not forget this key part of the information. If you are in the camp of Robert Kraft is cheap, then you must not believe this story. Because if Robert Kraft ordered the code red, so to speak, on Belichick in Atlanta, Kraft had to pay Belichick the final year of that contract. If Belichick got hired by Blank in Atlanta, Blank would offset the money that was owed to Belichick by the Patriots. So if you think Kraft is cheap, then you can't believe this story. Because if you believe this story and you believe that Kraft was being super petty and pretty much told blank, don't trust Bill Belichick, don't hire Bill Belichick, then you're telling me Robert Kraft was A-okay paying the full freight of Belichick's contract in that final year on the deal. You can't have it both ways. And let's always remember, no matter the story, no matter how great the writers are, sources have agendas. Sources have their viewpoint. Bill Belichick's sources, they need a scapegoat. It's easy to blame Robert Kraft for Belichick not getting the job in Atlanta because it doesn't point the finger on Bill Belichick or at Bill Belichick, and it doesn't bring up the other things I just brought up as to why he might not get hired. Robert Kraft's sources, they have an agenda. They want to protect Kraft, and they don't want to make him look bad to the fans. So don't forget the agendas. All right, we'll get to the draft in a minute. First, Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. Warzone has 9 maps on 30-plus acres of land. We're talking multiple villages, trench warfare map, hilltop forts. They've got paintball. They've got airsoft. They've got paintball and airsoft. They also have paintball and airsoft for kids, kid versions of it. Something for every age group starting at 6+. Show up with jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt. They will take care of the rest. They are fantastic. 4.9 star rating online. Staff is great. Check out Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Give them a call at 401-228-6366. That's 401-228-6366. Again, Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Tell them the Nick Cattle Show sent you. All right, let's get to the draft. Next couple days, I think, are huge at Gillette. Huge here in Foxborough. We are officially 8 days away from the draft, and this is the point. This is the point in the process where teams start to finalize their board. This is when they start putting the final pieces together. Right? And Greg Bedard had a fantastic story over the weekend speaking to a source who was a coach, who was also an offensive coordinator in the league, was a front office exec for multiple teams, and was responsible, or at least partially responsible, for, drafting multiple quarterbacks, was in the front office of teams that had to draft the next quarterback. It was a really good piece by Greg. And when Greg spoke to the source on the decision-making group, and when that group shrinks, the source said, quote, very soon, and again, this was last weekend, very soon, then it will be just the people who need to know. I could see it being Elliott, Alonzo, Gerard, and the Krafts at some point. You don't want too many. I could also see Elliott and Alonzo going off together to make the final tweaks. Now that I think of it, that makes sense. They didn't come this far in their careers together to blow this draft. And then the source said, this is when they will make the final tweaks to the vertical stack. That's why all this, quote, I know the Patriots have X at the top of their board, unquote, is complete BS. That was on the board for all to see. Now the board will change again. That could have just been a fake out for that reason. Now Elliott, Alonzo, and Gerard will make those final changes, and no one else will know. Stop for a second. Give us that thumbs up. Slap the algorithm in the face. We appreciate you. Okay, so number one, we talked about trust. We talked about trust just a couple of minutes ago with this Belichick, Kraft, blank story, right? Well, this is when you talk about trust. When you start to stack your board, when you start putting your final draft board together, you have to have the ultimate trust within each other that nothing is going to leak. No one is going to say something absurd. People are going to keep it tight. And the people that are in the circle of trust, so to speak, Robert De Niro style, the people who are in that circle of trust will stand by each other, stack that board, and keep quiet. And so we are now in the final stages, folks. We can feel it, right? Can you feel it? I can feel it. Again, 8 days away from the draft. We've been talking about this seemingly forever, but we're getting closer to the final board being stacked. And now the voices in that room, right? The voices in the room for the last few weeks, the 9 guys who went to Drake May's pro day, those voices, some of them are being eliminated. Thank you for the input. We appreciate your opinion, but we're going to move forward with just this group of people. Who's in the group? We don't know. Obviously, Elliot Wolf's in the group. Obviously, Alonzo Highsmith is in that group because he's Wolf's right-hand man. Obviously, Gerard Mayo is in that group because he's the head coach. Does Matt Groh have a seat at the table? Does Pat Stewart have a seat at that table? Does Cam Williams have a seat? Are the Krafts already involved, or will they get involved much later in the process right before the draft next week? This is now what we're talking about. This is the period we've been that we've been looking for and waiting for, and this is where we're at. There are only going to be a few people in that room. If the Patriots do it right, there are only going to be a few people in that room now talking about, do you like May more than Daniels? Do you like Daniels more than McCarthy? What do you think of Michael Penix after his visit this week? What do you think about wide receiver 5 versus offensive tackle 8? This is what we're doing. This is the next step in the process. So here's a bit of advice. Any rumors that you hear, and I mean any rumors that you hear from this point moving forward, are even less believable than the rumors before this point, because there are less people involved in the process now. Earlier on, that's why you get all of the smoke screens. That's why you get all of the information being leaked, because there are more people in the room. There are scouts in the room. There are coaches in the room. There are more people in that room having the conversations. But as you get closer to the process being finished, as you get closer to draft night, more and more people leave that room. And so the circle of trust for each team, they're a lot less likely to talk at this point than anybody else that was in that room 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So any rumors that we hear from this point until the draft, even less believable. I do wonder what the level of Gerard Mayo's involvement is. Is Mayo going to have a bigger voice than what we think he's going to have? Reportedly, he doesn't want to be shopping for the groceries. Reportedly, Mayo wants to just coach. Is that the truth? We don't know. No idea. That's what we've been told. I just mentioned the horizontal stack. The source talked to Greg Bedard about that. Said the horizontal stack will now happen, and that's when you start comparing the positions. That's when the Patriots, right? So for the next week or so, for the next 8 days, maybe even leading right up to the draft, when you're looking at the horizontal stack, vertically is just, here's our board 1 through 50. The horizontal stack is, do you like Michael Penix more than Xavier Legette? Do you like Ladd McConkey more than Kingsley Suamataia? That's the horizontal stack. So you stack vertically. You got your big board, position by position, right? You go, okay, here is our 1 through 7 at quarterback. Whoever you like. Here's 1 through 7 at quarterback. Then you do receiver, tackle, all the positions. And you stack the guys that you like in this draft, that you love in this draft. That's the vertical stacking. Horizontal stacking is now when you start to compare different positions. How do you feel about your 4th quarterback versus your 4th wide receiver or 4th offensive tackle? So that's going to be happening over the next 7 or 8 days as well. That's why we're getting closer, folks. If you're Elliot Wolf, now you're having the conversation. Okay, do you like Bo Nix and Michael Penix more than Kingsley Suamataia? Do you like, let's see, A.D. Mitchell more than you like Amarius Mims? That's what we're doing now. Do you like the idea of the wide receiver or the offensive tackle in the 2nd round? Why do you like that idea? Why do you like the wide receiver more than the tackle, or the tackle more than the wide receiver? That's what they're doing. The scouts have done their work, folks. The scouts have done their jobs. They have mostly moved on. Now, they might be sent out for more information. They might be sent to a college. They might be sent to somebody's house to have more conversations, right? They might do that. They could still work people out. The top 30 visits are over as of today, but the team can still go out and talk to these guys and work these guys out, right? We got to remember that. So the scouts can still do that. But right now, when we talk about war rooms, when we talk about conversations happening with Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo and Alonzo Highsmith, the conversations, those scouts are mostly out of the room now. They've done their job. The grades are up. And now it's up to Wolf, Highsmith, and Mayo to stack that board vertically and horizontally. It's an exciting time. You know what else is exciting? Helping an alternative. Take a second, give us that thumbs up, like and subscribe to this podcast. If you love the content, enjoy the content, rate and review Spotify, Apple Pods. Trying to hit now 3,500 subscriptions. We're a long way away, one step at a time. Baby steps. Baby steps. Jeff Howe on the program tomorrow at 11 a.m. to talk draft. You don't want to miss that. So the other question I have before we get to something else and wrap up the show today, because we do have something else to talk about Patriots related. How big is the Patriots draft board? Belichick historically had a smaller draft board, right? He had a smaller number of guys to choose from. Belichick might go into a draft with like 25 or 30 guys on his board. Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith, part of the reason why they've changed this grading system that Belichick had used for so long is because they thought it eliminated too many guys and that the Patriots were being way too specific, way too role specific when they were stacking their board. And they would eliminate names that they should not have eliminated. So I would imagine, because of the new grading system and because how Wolf and Highsmith approach things, I would imagine that the Patriots board is larger in number of players. They will have a larger pool to select from. I would love to see how big the board is and who is on that board. I would love to see it. All right. One last thing. Let's talk about Peter Schrager from the NFL Network. He did his first mock draft yesterday. Here's what he wrote. And again, I will warn you that Peter Schrager was wrong an awful lot on his mock draft last year. I saw Pat McAfee say, he's been really accurate, and I've seen other people say he's super plugged in. He could be plugged in, but his mock draft last year had Will Levis going 4. Now, I will say he had a lot of the guys who were drafted in the first round in his first round, but where they were going, not so much. All right. So why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because of philosophy. We're talking about this because of the information. Again, Schrager might get good information. His mock draft could be thrown off by a number of different things. That's why mock drafts are very difficult, because you've got a million people talking to you and you're trying to situate it all. But here's what Schrager said. Let's take the intel. Despite lots of smoke that New England could trade down, I believe this new Patriots regime will be comfortable with either Jaden Daniels or Drake May. Pat's brass took May out for steaks the night before his Foxborough visit. How was Davios? Those guys loved the Charlotte native. That said, the Patriots also loved their top 30 visit with Daniels. I think they're fine with whichever one falls to them. New England also wined and dined J.J. McCarthy on Monday night, but I see this selection being Daniels or May. So Pete Schrager from the NFL Network is telling us, from what he's heard, Patriots loved the visit with Drake May, loved the visit with Jaden Daniels. This pick is going to be between one of those two guys, and the Patriots would be fine with either of them. Trading is tough, right? Trading the third pick is tough. Very tough, because it's a top 3 pick. Very difficult to say goodbye to a top 3 pick. You don't get many swings in the top 3. Well, if you're an organization like the Patriots have been. Last time they were up this high in a draft was Drew Bledsoe, right? More than 30 years ago. You don't get many opportunities to draft in the top 3. So it's first very difficult to move on from that kind of a pick. It's also very difficult to move on from that kind of a pick when you know you need a QB of the future and you're looking at quarterback prospects like Daniels, May, and McCarthy, some would say. I'm a little lower on McCarthy. First round pick to me, not top 3 pick. But if you need a quarterback like the Patriots do of the future, and you're staring at Daniels and Drake May, very difficult to deal that pick. Incredibly challenging to do. You have to justify it by bringing in a haul. And some would say no haul would justify trading this 3rd pick if you think one of these quarterbacks could be special. I lean towards that side. Second thing I would remind people of, Ron Wolf, the father of Elliott, was 100% a traits guy. If Ron Wolf was making this pick, there's no way in hell it would be J.J. McCarthy. How much does Elliott stray away from his father? Does Elliott believe in almost everything his dad did? Does Elliott look at how the Green Bay Packers drafted the quarterback position? And does Elliott say that's how you do it? Very difficult because Elliott was also part of the front office in Cleveland that drafted Baker Mayfield. And Mayfield did not have these superhuman traits that jumped out to you. As people tell it, reporters tell it, Wolf loved Baker's mentality, his attitude, his toughness, his compete, his leadership. That might lead you a little bit more to J.J. McCarthy. But if you're looking at traits, and Elliott is going off of top traits, because again, remember, Wolf did not make that ultimate decision on Mayfield in Cleveland. He wasn't the number 1 guy. If Wolf leans more towards like his father and looks at elite traits and is a trait guy, it's going to be Drake May or Jaden Daniels if the Patriots stick and pick. If they stick and pick. One thing, if you love draft talk, we're going to do something different next week at the Patreon page. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Patreon exclusive draft podcasts. I'm going to do one each day, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. We're going to have a bunch of draft content, aside from the content we do on this podcast, at the Patreon page. $5 a month, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. Sign up if you'd like. One more point. This idea of the Patriots being, quote unquote, fine with whichever quarterback falls to them, they have to have a favorite, right? They have to have a favorite. They might love both guys, but don't they have to love one of the guys just a little bit more? Don't they have to love Drake May just a little bit more than Daniels, or vice versa? I just can't imagine that Elliott Wolf has the same exact grade on Daniels and Drake May. Maybe he does. But what I think is going on when people say they would be fine with whichever one falls to them, let's say the grading system, I can't remember off the top of my head. Somebody did write about the grading system months ago. The grading system is 0 to 10 to make it easy. What I think these reports are saying, that the Patriots would be fine with whichever one, Daniels or May, whichever one falls to them. The grade is probably very similar. And both guys would meet a threshold to justify being picked 3. So let's say Jaden Daniels is a 7.3 on the grading system. Drake May might be a 7.5. The Patriots say anybody over a 7 is worthwhile drafting 3rd. You pick up what I'm putting down? I think that's what's happening. I don't think it's a case of we're just going to take whoever's there. Whoever falls, we're going to be happy. I think they're going off of their grading system, and their grading system tells them that Daniels and May both reach a certain point. They both reach a certain threshold that justifies the pick at 3. But they do. I would imagine they do love one of the guys more than the others. My guess, and it's just a guess, is Drake May. I said that last week. I believe Drake May is Elliott Wolf's guy. Could be totally wrong. He could hate Drake May. But for this conversation, let's say he loves Drake May and Drake May's his guy. If the Patriots say a quarterback has to have a grade of 7, for example, to be picked in the top 3, and Drake May is sitting there at 7.3, Daniels is a 6.7, and McCarthy is a 6.6, then if May's not there, the Patriots look to trade out. And I think what they've done is a terrific job of throwing a bunch of crap out there, by the way. A bunch of crap. Because there's so much talk about the Patriots are going to trade. The Patriots could trade. The Patriots are entertaining trades. The Patriots want a Godfather offer. Pete Schrager says he doesn't think the Patriots are going to trade out. Adam Schefter just said over the last 24 hours that the Patriots could trade out. I don't think anybody has any clue what in the blue hell the Patriots are planning to do. And I think some of it is that the Patriots likely don't know what they're going to do. How is that possible, Nick? Because they're drafting 3rd. They know Caleb Williams is going 1st. They don't know who Washington is going to pick. So if that grading system does say Drake May, justified 3rd pick, J.J. McCarthy, Daniels, maybe not. Well, if the Commanders draft May, number 2, the Patriots are open for business. And I'm sure they have talked to other teams and laid the foundation to possibly make a deal or two if the guy the Patriots truly want at 3 is not there. All right. That'll do it. Any more breaking news? We will get to it later in the day, I'm sure. If there is no breaking news, we'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Don't forget, Jeff Howe will join us. Jeff Howe from The Athletic, our guest tomorrow to talk about the NFL draft, all the intel that he has. Should be a great conversation. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. I appreciate every single one of you. Until tomorrow, unless something big breaks, this has been The Nick Cattle Show.